Good afternoon and welcome to this ICAEW webinar, How to Successfully Deliver a Digital Finance Transformation for Your Charity, which we're running in partnership with Xledger. My name is Christina Kopic. I'm the head of charity and voluntary sector here at the ICAEW, and I will facilitate this session today. As always, we encourage you to get involved with the webinar. Please submit your question to us using the Q&A widget that you can find at the bottom of your screen. We have allowed time at the end for your questions, so please keep them coming in throughout the webinar. You can also use the Q&A box to let us know if you experience any technical issues, and we'll do our best to help with those as well. Closed captioning is enabled for this webinar. You can turn on this feature by clicking on the CC icon that you can find on your screen. These are automatically generated captions, so they will not be 100% accurate. A link to some other useful resources will shortly appear in the chat box for you. But now on to the webinar. So from a recent community survey and some feedback that we receive after webinars and events, we know that many of you are working with larger charities and are very interested in driving efficiencies in the finance function so that more time can be spent supporting the organization's work and deliver value-add contributions. So this webinar is for you. It will include multiple video demos from the Xledger system to illustrate exactly how you can use a modern cloud-based finance system to overcome system issues and to drive efficiencies. We have two great speakers today, both highly experienced in managing a digital finance transformation, and they will take you through several challenges that Comic Relief was trying to overcome with their new finance system and share how they achieved that. So our speakers today are Deborah Morton, a consultant at Xledger, and Lydia Fowles, who is the financial data and systems lead for Comic Relief. They will introduce themselves properly in a moment. So without further ado, I hand over to Deborah and Lydia.
Thanks, Christina. So Xledger is a leading finance software solution. It supports charity and not-for-profit organisations, and about 70% of our customer base is actually in this area. So our powerful software and accountancy trained consultants support the sector through their finance transformation journeys. My name's Deborah, and I was actually originally a customer of Xledger, implementing the software as part of the Wildlife Trust, before I then came to work for Xledger as an implementation consultant several years later. My background in accounting is specifically charity and not-for-profit, so I've been through the process of transferring pain points such as my fund accounting from multiple offline spreadsheets into Xledger, and then using the finance software to create these instead from the real-time data in the system. And I was actually fortunate enough to be involved with the implementation of Xledger for Comic Relief at various stages throughout the process. Lydia?
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Lydia. I'm the Financial Data and Systems Lead at Comic Relief. If you haven't heard of Comic Relief, you might have heard of Red Nose Day, which is our big regular night of TV every year in March. Usually there's a TV show on BBC One. We've also just launched a sport relief campaign this week for the summer. The charity's vision is a just world free from poverty, and we've raised 40 million so far this year from Red Nose Day, and we're going to give out that money in grants to help alleviate poverty and tackle injustice across the UK and the rest of the world. I've been with Comic Relief for coming up to 6 years, and I've seen a lot of change in that time, including 3 new systems within our finance team, one of those being Xledger, which is why I'm here. Our previous general ledger we've been using for many years, and we hadn't kept up with all the updates. I think we hadn't updated it since 2015, so it was very out of date. Any change was going to be absolutely massive for us. We had lots of procedures and processes that were convoluted, time consuming, and a lot of it was due to the limitations of our system and having always done things that way. So pre and during implementation, we really pushed ourselves to review all the ways of working and to try and simplify, remove unnecessary steps, and not to overcomplicate the system setup too much. Our previous system had lots of bespoke setup, which made it really difficult to understand if people moved on to different roles. So our main goals of the project that we'll be able to share some info on in this webinar were to improve supplier management alongside implementing our procurement policy, better and more automated reporting, including being able to pull our annual accounts directly from the system and to easily create our VAT returns. Improve productivity in the finance team with things such as bank rec, fixed asset management, and expense and invoice approval moving to within our finance system, and better quality of data, particularly around journal entry and automation of repetitive bank transactions. So I'm just going to go through some of the problems we experienced one by one, and then Deb will be able to share some information on how Xledger helped us with that. So the first thing that we come to is the structures within the system. So our chart of accounts, every transaction in our chart of accounts has got 5 segments attached to it. So nominal, cost center, activity, project, and fund. In our old system, this was set up as an individual string for every combination that we wanted to exist. So as you can imagine, there was quite a lot of combinations. We were constantly reviewing, setting up new strings. Our journal imports were failed because we needed a string to be added to the system. So we were looking for something a bit more flexible than that. Although one of our concerns was that people would be able to post anywhere and they might use some odd combinations.
Thanks, Lydia. I'd like to show you now an example of how Xledger was able to resolve this issue for Comic Relief using some flexible analysis fields. In Xledger, we can set up one chart of accounts for all of your companies, allowing for streamlined group reporting. This chart of accounts is independent of the other analysis characteristics, thereby negating the need for constant updates and ensuring consistency in journal entry across all companies. We then have several dimensions that can be attached to each journal to further define the data. For example, cost center and project are default objects within your system that can be applied independently to each journal and be used to restrict user access to particular data in reports, such as only being able to see the cost center for which you are the budget holder. There are then additional dimensions that can be set up depending on your individual needs. For example, one could be called donor activity, and another can be used for marking the type of fund that relates to each journal or supplier invoice. This allows for tailored reporting for the business and the ability to ensure that things like statutory reports such as the SOFA can be produced within Xledger. To ensure that all of these different dimensions are controlled to allow for correct post into the system, we can set up specific rules that can enforce the use of one or multiple objects to always be applied to journals. Here, GL Object 1, which is the cost center, is required on the profit and loss side of all journals to be posted. The other objects are available, but they do not have to be used in this instance. This can aid in both reporting and budgeting, as otherwise you might be unsure if a blank field is intentional or not. Additionally, we can then restrict which objects are available in certain circumstances. For example, only allowing certain cost centers to be selectable if a particular account code is used. If we use account code 1020 and then look at our cost center selections, we have the whole list to choose from. If we then change to 1220, our available list has now reduced to the only ones that we have predefined in the system for this chart of account code. If we change again to 1010, then the cost center has been fixed and predefined that it's already been selected as soon as you choose the chart of account code. Okay, so that was a bit about the chart of accounts and structures. I know, Lydia, now you wanted to talk about your supplier management.
Yeah, so we were keen to know more about our suppliers and where our money was being spent. We didn't have much data or easily accessible data in our old system. It was very difficult to close down or hide old suppliers, so it meant there was an awful lot of information to wade through. I think we had 2,000 or 3,000 suppliers that we were looking to import, and many of them we hadn't used for a long time. We were also keen to be able to identify owners within the business for our top suppliers so that we knew who to direct AP queries to, as this often wasn't clear to us.
Thanks, Lydia. Let's take a look at some of that supplier management in the system. The supplier register is held within Xledger and fully integrated with the other areas of the system. You can hold as much or as little data on your suppliers as you want or need to. For example, we can hold specific contact details, supplier currency, payment terms, and even specify default general ledger analysis fields if required, including the applicable VAT rule for purchases through each supplier. Defining these fields on a supplier ensures smoother processing of supplier invoices for the wider finance team, as this will define these default fields on the invoice for you, reducing the risk of manual error and ensuring that the processing is more efficient. You can also add your own additional flexible fields to define unique information such as preferred supplier, to clearly mark each supplier with data that you want to be able to report on. When creating a new supplier, Xledger has several warnings in the system, such as that the supplier code already exists and that the bank account already exists held on another supplier, thereby assisting you in reducing the possibility of setting up duplicate suppliers. The ability to enter these supplier details can be restricted to specific employees. This can ensure a clear segregation of duties and better financial controls. Also, a traffic light system on supplier invoices ready for payment to let approvers know if you or other Xledger customers have ever paid to these suppliers before with these particular bank details. It is easy to hide and reopen suppliers within the register, enabling you to ensure that your supplier register is kept as clean as possible to aid in any of your supplier reporting. The register itself, along with other supplier data screens, are flexible reporting screens, allowing you to view the data you want to see in the way that you want it and setting up template reports. Okay, that was some basic supplier management within the system. So now we've got our suppliers set up and our structures set up. Let's have a look at the problems you were experiencing with journal entry.
Yeah, so journal entry has been life-changing, I think, in Xledger. It was really complicated and time-consuming in our old system. For a number of years, we didn't have a journal approval workflow in the system, so we used to print out each journal and physically sign them for approval before we filed away the paper copy. We then had a journal template file that we had to use to integrate the journals, which was very difficult to understand. It's very easy to make errors. It was hard to train new starters. So now we can have our journal approvals and backups saved in the system, which is saving us a huge amount of time, especially when it comes to audit and trying to understand who's posted something and why.
Thanks. So what we'll look at now is just one method for processing journals in Xledger. There are actually multiple ways this can be done, and which method you use can depend on the type of journal you're processing, and you can adapt your processes to suit you, but the drag and drop functionality was helpful for Comic Relief, particularly when moving from Excel-based journaling to a new system. The familiarity of certain methods can aid in change management within your finance team. Using Xledger's drag and drop functionality means that you no longer have to rely on Excel-based journals that could be incorrect due to manual error. This is where regular and larger journals can be prepared in Excel to reduce the amount of work for the finance team, and then the Excel file can be dragged into the journal entry screen. This allows for the journal to be reviewed prior to posting it to the accounts to check it is all correct. As you can see in this example, a copy of the Excel file is part of the journal, and this can be reviewed in screen to ensure all of the details have been picked up correctly. We can see the journal, edit any lines, and view the original file. These drag and drop journals can also be sent through the workflow for approval. if required, to ensure that only correct and necessary journals are posted to your general ledger. Here we can see that this journal has now gone to a more senior member of the finance team. It sits with them for approval before it posts, and this allows for clear segregation of duties within the finance team and also keeps a full audit trail of the journal in Xledger, ensuring a smooth process and ability to see any changes or adjustments made. Holding this information within Xledger ensures that your auditors can view all of the information they require within the system, allowing for a much smoother audit. Okay, so now we've looked at supplier management and the actual posting of the supplier invoices. Lydia, would you like to discuss how your supplier invoices were then approved before using Xledger?
Yeah, so our supplier invoices were approved outside of the finance system, and then we'd import them in. It made it really difficult in relation to audit trails and approving the payment runs, because we'd have to make checks in various different systems, and previously checks were made on paper.
Okay, so now let's look at how we can do the approval of those invoices in Xledger. Workflow setup in Xledger can be defined by multiple analysis characteristics, such as cost center, amount, project, and so on, depending on what analysis fields are configured specifically for your entities. Here, we can see that donor activity is an option, as well as XGL, where we can find our different fund types. Any approver in Xledger can receive email notifications to let them know that an invoice has been sent to them for approval. That way, they don't need to keep logging in to check or have anyone contact them to let them know. They can link through to approve those invoices by clicking on voucher approval within the body of the text of the invoice. Alternatively, approving the invoices from within Xledger is very simple. When I have invoices to approve, I will receive a task on the left-hand side in my task list saying invoice is ready for approval. And I can click this to go directly to the relevant area to view, check and approve or reject supplier invoices. This screen shows me the pertinent information in relation to the invoice. I can hover over the image, or I can click through to it to see all of the detail. If I use purchase orders, I'll be able to see the original purchase order connected to this invoice following the link to allow for budget holders to easily see if the invoice is in line with the purchase order they approved. If I find an error, I can simply reject the invoice. By using my red exclamation mark, I can then choose reject and give a comment. This will return the invoice back to the finance team to adjust and resubmit for approval when ready. The full audit trail of approval is held within Xledger, which allows for better financial controls and visibility of where in the process the invoice has reached. Having the approval held within Xledger also ensures that the finance team are able to see who an invoice is sat with if required, and also easily calculate their month-end accruals for any supplier invoices not yet posted to the general ledger. Okay, so following on from supplier invoice approval, everything goes through in system, ends up being approved for payment within the bank, and bank payments come in through the system. So Lydia, do you want to talk about the problems that you had with bank recs before Xledger?
Yeah, so we've always had a lot of similar and repetitive transactions coming through the bank. So things like interest, regular income from a particular donor, payroll transactions. We have a daily sweep transaction between our accounts. And yet again, we had a complex spreadsheet to identify and post transactions every month via a manual journal. This was really time consuming. It was really fiddly to do. So we'd only do it once a month. Meaning that there was a lot of bank rec work to be done in a short space of time so that we could meet the month-end deadlines.
Thanks, Lydia. Let's take a look now at how Xledger helped you solve these issues and make life a little easier for the finance team. In Xledger, we integrate your bank account to pull through all of your statement lines daily. This is done automatically via an integration, and the bank lines come through each morning for the previous day. We can see here in our bank reconciliations screen our current unreconciled items. For regular income and expenditure, you can then set up as many auto bank posting rules as you need. They could be for annual payments, daily ones, weekly ones, and you're not limited by the number that you can create. You define which analysis fields each journal needs to post to. You can define the cost centre, the project, the activity, and the fund, as well as the VAT rule and the account code that it goes to. The auto bank postings in Xledger run automatically every morning after the bank statement has arrived for the previous day, ensuring that when the finance team come to work, they're only left with the outstanding items to post, thereby reducing the workload for them and also ensuring more accurate postings as you're removing the possibility of manual error. Here we can see an automatic bank journal that has been posted through for one of the payments in the bank reconciliation. Xledger periodically runs a process to auto-reconcile the bank statement lines with any bank journals that are posted. This is whether they are automatic journals or manually posted ones. There is no need for the finance team to manually reconcile the bank accounts. This is all achieved automatically in system throughout the month, reducing the pressure on finance teams at month end and ensuring a more accurate and controlled internal process, which also allows for real-time reporting for both budget holders, cash flow forecasting and credit control purposes. Okay, so moving on from the bank reconciliation, then Lydia, I think expenses and credit card claims were quite a painful point for you.
Yeah, so our staff expense and credit card spend was reconciled outside of the finance system again, many years on paper with paper receipts clipped to them, and then after that in a separate system that would be imported across. This meant we were relying on importing into the finance system, and there was a lack of visibility on what was outstanding each month as well as what the money was actually being spent on. So by the time the transactions were loaded into our finance system, they'd often be missing things like the description and so on.
Okay, thanks, Lydia. Let's have a look at how expense claims and approvals then look within Xledger. Expense claims are fully integrated within Xledger. Employees can use the Xledger app to take pictures of receipts on the go and add them to the system for when they are ready to make a claim. Here are some that have already been added throughout the month. To submit them as a claim, I can simply pull these receipts through into my expense claim, and then I can submit it ready for approval once my claim is ready. This reduces the risk of missing receipts to evidence the claims and also ensures that employees can make a claim from anywhere at any time. Expense claims are set up with custom, end-user friendly expense types, such as mileage, public transport, equipment, and so on. These are all linked to your chart of accounts in the background, so once the expense claim is approved, the system automatically posts it to the general ledger. This reduces the risk of manual error and the volume of work manually entering expenses for the finance team. Having the expense claim approval within Xledger allows for the audit trail to be fully visible. Credit card or prepaid credit card spends work in much the same way. The credit card statements can be held in system, and then cardholders are able to match the receipts that they've loaded throughout the month to this. As we can see here, we have 3 credit card line items that are still waiting to be submitted as part of a claim. This one here shows me that one of my outstanding receipts that I've loaded matches this amount. I can then choose to bring that through into the claim, and the claim marks it as clearly already paid by the company. So there's no risk of paying your employee for any of these card purchases. Approvers can be automatically notified of any claims ready for them to approve. And when they approve them, they can see all the information on the claim relating to the image. They can see any receipts that have been uploaded as part of the expense claim, so that they can check that the claim is accurate. Similarly, employees can be notified automatically if their claim has been returned to them or approved, therefore reducing their reliance on the finance team for updates, and they also do not need to keep logging into the system to check this. Okay, so that was a basic overview of expenses within Xledger. Lydia, I know one of the other problems that a lot of people happen to have is intercompanies, where you've got multiple companies and having to charge those transactions across and be able to reconcile it all properly at the end of the month.
Yeah, so at Comic Relief, we've got a separate trading entity set up for certain transactions, and you won't be surprised to hear it was a manual journal at month end. After identifying transactions in a spreadsheet, we'd then post them across through the intercompany. This took ages. It was prone to human error, as sometimes we're relying on our own knowledge to spot the transactions. And in terms of paying suppliers, we could only pay suppliers out of one entity. So any trading related payments were being moved across each month.
Thanks, Lydia. So the intercompany functionality in Xledger is actually one of my personal favourite areas, as it took a lot of pain out of my monthly days previously. And it works the same whether you have two companies or many. So let's look at how this works to have helped speed up your processing and reconciliations. Xledger is a fully integrated ledger. This means that I can easily transfer costs directly to the relevant company, even if I have one supplier invoice that relates to several of my companies. When processing the supplier invoice, I post it mostly as normal to the cost accounts that I need it to go to. However, on the section that I need to charge to another company, I simply select my other company that I want to post to. My options for chart of account codes, cost centres, funds, etc. that are then available for me for this line of the journal relate to that specific entity. When I post the supplier invoice, the system automatically posts the full cost of the supplier invoice to the supplier account in the current entity ready for payment. The expense lines that relate to the current entity are posted as normal. The expense line then for the separate company are automatically posted to the intercompany account within my current entity. Simultaneously, Xledger then posts these expense lines into the correct company to the cost account selected and the intercompany account code. This negates the need to keep track of all of these separate costs outside of Xledger, or for month-end invoices to be prepared to multiple entities to recharge the costs as they've already been accounted for. The intercompany account at the group level will then automatically net off to zero, as the system has automatically posted both transactions into each entity. This reduces the lengthy intercompany reconciliations and the chance of errors. Similarly, if you need to invoice one of your other companies, you can do that within the one entity. It creates a system invoice. And once the sales invoice is generated, the system will auto send this invoice into the correct company as a supplier invoice. This can then be set up to auto-select the predefined account codes and analysis, if required, based on the products that have been selected in the original sales invoice. This further reduces the possibility of any post-in errors in either of your companies. Okay, so that's a general overview of how intercompany can work. There's obviously a lot of setup in the background just to make sure that it gets fixed and it goes to the correct places. Lydia, I think you wanted to talk about VAT next in terms of how you're then submitting your claims.
Yeah, I mean, I never want to talk about VAT, but I know some people like it, and we do have to pay it. As a charity, we have a partial VAT exemption agreement with HMRC, so we needed a non-standard setup. It's not always straightforward and to run and submit the VAT return each quarter. As with everything else, this was a manual and time-consuming process in the past.
Thanks, Lydia. So charity VAT recovery can be a minefield to ensure that you're recovering the correct amounts. So let's take a look at how we can simplify that for you within Xledger. In Xledger, we can set up your partial VAT rates within the system, even if your recovery rate differs between analysis fields such as cost centres and projects. Then, no matter who is posting any journal to the system, once they have selected, for example, a specific project and entered a VAT rule, the invoice then calculates the full VAT amount and the amount that can be recovered based on the recovery rate that has been specified within the VAT setup. The amount you can recover is then sent directly to your input VAT control account, and the irrecoverable VAT can either be sent to an irrecoverable VAT P&L code, or it can be added to the same cost code as the rest of the journal. This allows you to calculate the true costs of your purchases in real time, instead of lengthy and difficult VAT adjustments whenever your VAT return is due. Additionally, if you have a partial rate that has to be calculated regularly, based on postings such as non-business income, the recovery rate can be set ready for the next quarter to ensure that each journal posting treats the VAT correctly, without any input from the finance team. If required, a small VAT adjustment journal can be posted to correct the final VAT return based on the true partial VAT recovery rate for the period. Once you reach the end of your VAT period, you can simply run the VAT return report on each company in which you are VAT registered. Then, if they are all within the same VAT group, you can submit them all together through Xledger. The submission goes directly to HMRC, and the system then auto-posts the VAT settlement journal for you. Okay, so that was a short kind of coverage of VAT. I know it's not everybody's favourite subject, but it's often quite a pain point within charities and not-for-profits. I know mine always was before I went into it, and being able to submit through the system and just small adjustments instead of huge adjustments at the end of a quarter can really save a lot of time. So fixed assets is the next area that you needed to look at, Lydia.
Yeah, so our fixed asset register, if I can call it that, was a spreadsheet that nobody could properly understand. We used to calculate the monthly depreciation using an Excel formula, and then use that to feed into a manual journal that get posted monthly. New assets we'd identify by manually looking through the transaction list and then adding them onto the spreadsheet, adding a new formula in. It was really easy to miss things or make small errors when you were posting, and we didn't have a real clear overview of what our fixed assets actually were.
Okay, so fixed assets are another of my favourite areas in Xledger, and I know transferring a register from a mix of spreadsheets to Xledger can feel like a huge undertaking, but the benefits of having it in Xledger certainly make up for this. So let's take a look at assets. The fixed asset register in Xledger is fully integrated into the system, allowing for the end of your reliance on complex spreadsheets that can be prone to error. You can hold all of the details of each asset within the register, as much or as little detail as you have or want. When processing a supplier invoice, you can automatically post the cost to the asset account. Xledger enforces an asset to be selected when using any asset management balance sheet account codes, thereby ensuring that your asset register always fully reconciles with the general ledger. Depreciation is also set up within the asset. and does not have to start depreciation until the full cost has been allocated to the relevant asset. You define the type of depreciation, the amount that needs depreciating, how many months you require the asset to depreciate over, and when you want the depreciation to start from. Each month you can then run a simple server process that then automatically posts all of the depreciation for every asset simultaneously. If you are unsure as to whether you have set up your depreciation correctly, you can run a depreciation forecast. This allows you to check how the depreciation will look across the future months, as well as it being a helpful budgeting tool. Any asset disposals is also a simple process within the system. Predefined chart of account codes are set up to ensure that the disposal process always posts to the correct accounts. Once you enter the disposal information on an asset within the register, you can then run the process that calculates everything for you. It clears down the cost and depreciation accounts and posts the gain or loss on disposal into your accounts automatically. The asset register also has its own flexible reporting screens, where template reports can be built and the detail of the data can be held and the financial data can be viewed and drilled into without leaving the system.
Okay, so that's a little look at assets. Let's move on now to reporting flexibly. So there's a variety of screens. You'll have seen several already throughout various demo areas in the system so far. Lydia, what were you looking for particularly?
I mean, this was a huge one. I think we could probably do a whole webinar on reporting. We used to use an Excel add-on to pull reports from our finance system, so we couldn't do anything in system. Nobody really understood how it worked, how to change the reports. So our go-to was always a transaction list, and then we'd be pivoting on that in Excel and creating new reports using filters and things like that. We wanted to do more analysis of our data and find out things like who our top suppliers were, which currencies we were spending the most in, which countries we were sending money to, report on our fund balances in a meaningful way. Yeah, much more, lots and lots of things we wanted to report on.
Yes, there are a variety of different reporting screens in Xledger, from flexible layouts to dashboards, and they can be tailored for roles or individuals. So let's take a look now at some of those in the system and how this can help you.
Using Xledger ensures that you no longer need to rely on many complex Excel sheets to create your reports. There are a variety of flexible reporting screens and dashboards throughout the system, depending on whether it's stand-in data or financial data that you want to look at. You can create tailored reports and drill down into the detail. Here we have a bespoke financial report. I can choose to view the report in a variety of ways, depending on how I want to look at the figures. I can also hover over or click through to drill down into the detail. This allows me to view attachments to any of the journals and check that all of the data is correct. Multiple templates can be created in any of these flexible reporting screens, whether it's financial figures or specific supplier data. So I don't need to build a new report every time I need to see my data, as the template reports can automatically update in real time. I can tag these templates so that I can find my reports easily. I can share them with everyone so that they're accessible by people throughout the system. I can view any of my reports in a variety of formats and then extract the data if required. Reporting in system allows for better financial controls, as the data is accessible without time-consuming manual interventions and no risk of formulas being overtyped.
As a budget holder, I can also view these reports, but I only see the data that is specific for my cost centres. So if I change roles to a budget holder role, we can see that this original statement of financial activities now has slightly different data to view, as I am only seeing my specific cost centres. This allows for budget holders to ensure they are keeping track of their budgets, reduce their reliance on finance to produce their reports, as they can self-serve throughout the month with up-to-date figures simply by logging in. Okay, so I think we're coming towards the end of the different areas that you wanted to cover, Lydia, and I think the demo environment wasn't necessarily a problem.
Yeah, no, it wasn't. Well, it wasn't a problem that I knew we needed to solve, but I just wanted to kind of give a shout out to the demo environment because it's been so helpful. Just to be able to test things out before you go live, or if you want to go in and have a play with things, you can put a journal in there and see what the impact's going to be before you post it in the live system. Also, when you're training new starters, super helpful because you don't have to touch the real data.
Yeah, let's take a look at some of that now. Within Xledger, we have multiple versions of the system. You may have noticed that today I have been in an Academy version, which we can use for training. However, when we start configuring your system, you will immediately have access to your own demo environment, which is a replica of what will be your live environment. We use this demo system during your implementation to test importing your data before putting it into your live environment. And this is to ensure that any errors or omissions are dealt with before going into your new finance system, ensuring that we keep your new system as clean as possible. We also use the demo environment for learning how to use your new system, and to aid in the understanding of it. And we do this by, wherever possible, using your own data, which helps you cement your learning and have really meaningful data, helps you consider your processes so you're ready for going live. Finally, we use this demo environment for testing your configuration and processes before you go live with your new finance system. Then, once you're live, you retain access to this demo environment. And the demo environment is updated every 2 weeks. This pulls through the data from your live system, so you're able to use the demo environment to train new staff and test new processes without affecting your live data, but with the most up-to-date data that you can. Okay, so that's kind of the end of the demonstration videos that we have today. Lydia, did you want to kind of like do a wrap up of where you are now and how you've been using the system?
Yeah, I think we're 18 months on now, I think, which has gone really quick. Our finance team are pretty happy using the system. We've had a few new starters and it's much easier to onboard new starters. Xledger is very intuitive in lots of areas, and we've got all the process notes that we documented when we implemented. We've also got a successful integration with our Salesforce grant management system and the bank, but there's scope for other integrations, including CRM and the HR system. So we're looking at those things next, as well as developing reporting and dashboards, which aren't quite where we wanted them to be yet. We went live mid-financial year. So 31st July is going to be our coming year end, which is going to be the first year end with full data the whole year within Xledger. So just looking forward to hopefully clicking a button and the annual accounts coming out.
Definitely.
Thank you both so much for your presentation. It was really great to see the system. Could we take down the slides just so that I can see you all properly? So we have a first question coming in. Do please all engage and use the Q&A box to submit any further questions. There's a question about cost, which I believe is not your area, Deborah. So I think, Hester, we refer you to the contact details that we have shared. So get in touch with Xledger and they can discuss that with you. Ian is asking, is Xledger suitable for smaller charities, for example, a hospice?
Yeah, we actually have a wide variety of different sized charities that actually use Xledger. So we do have some very small ones, we do have some very large ones. It's all a complete range, and it kind of just depends on the scalability. It'll give you the ability to grow, and it'll give you the ability to automate as much as you can and get some better reporting for you. So depending on what you actually need and what you can afford, then Xledger might be the right system for you.
Thank you. Yeah, we do often hear from smaller charities, and I think that's a really interesting question. I know you worked for the Wildlife Trust, didn't you, where you implemented Xledger, which is probably smaller than a smaller charity than Comic Relief. So it shows how scalable it is. So that's great. Thank you. Ian is asking, what charity-specific functionality is there in Xledger? It was good to see some of the examples, especially on the VAT return. That's certainly an area where I've struggled with finance systems in the past. And but is there anything else, Deborah, that you want to highlight, or Lydia, perhaps how you use it? You talked about the funds, that's clearly charity-specific. But is there any other area, maybe? Let's come to Lydia for that. Is there any other thing that you think is charity specific in the way you use Xledger?
I mean, everything we do is charity specific, so I guess it's all in the setup really. So Deb will be able to speak more on that, on how they helped us to set it up, because we worked quite closely with Xledger on specific things we wanted, such as I don't know, did we speak about the XGL in your demos? I can't remember, but our fund segment of our chart of accounts is the XGL in Xledger, and that allows us to do lots of different extra bits of reporting on our funds. So that's really useful. And then the VAT setup needed to be specific to us as well.
Yes, I think the structural setup and the VAT are probably the key main areas that really do relate to charities. So the XGL field in Xledger allows you to tag certain aspects to that field. So you could actually list out all of your different funders and mark as to whether they are restricted, unrestricted, designated, if they come from certain kinds of funders, just to kind of feed into your specific reporting that you need to do. And again, like Lydia said, they needed to tag an activity to every single transaction that they did. So if you need to do that, that can be set up. I know in mine, we didn't tag an activity. We actually had some different levels of analysis that we wanted to look at. Some charities just need to know what's restricted, unrestricted, and designated. Some need to know all the different funder types that they have, and you can tag those into transactions. So it kind of depends on what you want. Your implementation consultant would go through that with you and the best way to actually set it up.
Thank you. We have two questions about the implementation. So Lydia, I'll come to you and maybe I'll combine some of them. So how long did the implementation take? Were there any snags or difficulties? What are the challenges and lessons? And how does Xledger handle data transfer from the legacy system? So lots of questions about implementation. I hope you can share some of your learnings.
Yeah, thank you for those questions. I don't remember how long. I think it took about maybe up to 6 months. Deb, you can correct me if I'm wrong, because I think it was all we were working on for such a long time. But the main starting point and one of the main difficulties was the data from the old system, and that links into our old system not being great for our needs. It was hard to get the data out of the system, and what we didn't want to do was put a load of rubbish data into the new system. So we had to undertake a big data cleansing exercise. We weren't able to cleanse everything we wanted to. We didn't have time, so we had to prioritize there. But yeah, that was one of our difficulties, which was down to the old system and our capabilities of getting the information out. But we were able to work with Xledger. They provided really useful templates, so we could put everything into a template for the upload into the new system. Yeah, I think that, and probably just I would dedicate 10 times as much time for testing. I think as much time as you can for testing, because things start coming up once you get your data in there, then the system really starts to take shape and you can understand how it's going to work for you. So yeah, as much time as possible to test, because I think coming up to go live, we're still spotting things that we'd like to tweak.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that if I could. So I think one of the main snags and difficulties that people actually find when they come to implementing new software is underestimating the amount of resource and time it takes from their side. So, you know, we can talk about putting transferring legacy data in from your prior system, but do you have the time to actually map it out and put it in? To what level of detail do you want to go? And can you resource that and still maintain business as usual as you continue on through it? When you're quite a small charity, it can be quite hard to do. So you might want to go maybe through a longer implementation. The implementation phase can vary in how long it takes. Some people, if they have lots of changes that they need to make in order to do that change management within their company, they might actually implement in phases and go through in sections. They might go live generally with the system, but then maybe introduce purchasing later, build into reports after that, and carry on. And some people just push through and they need to get a system in because their other system is literally going to go offline and they have no further ability to use it. So when it comes to putting legacy data in the system, I've had a whole variety of customers in what they want to do. I've had it at transactional detail for the prior 3 years, including timesheets for the prior 3 years going through the system. It was a lot of work, but they needed it for their ongoing projects because they were across multiple years, and therefore they wanted to have that in the system because they couldn't access it in their legacy system. So I think the length of time of the implementation, we usually recommend around 4 months minimum. Some people, if they're going live with sections, will do it in shorter implements, and some people extend as they suddenly realize the true implications of, do they have the time, do they have the resource to put into it?
Thank you. Yeah, a lot of time investment, but well worth the investment because the returns that you get in terms of time savings, it was really quite astonishing to see just how much you were able to automate, Lydia at Comic Relief. So there's a question from Pamela about reporting. Does Xledger produce your year-end SOFA balance sheet and cash flow? And can these be produced by individual funds? You talked a little bit about the reporting as part of the presentation, but can you add a little bit to that?
Yes. Oh, sorry, Lydia.
No, go on. I was going to say we're hoping it will produce our year end this year, but this will be our first year with everything produced in Xledger. But I think, Deb, you can explain. I think it does have the capability to do everything that we want and everything that Pamela's asked.
Yeah, so in some of the examples that I showed, we had a SOFA in some of the reporting screens that you can build. So you can produce that throughout the year as long as you're posting funds against all of your transactions. The system's got real-time data that's constantly updating, as well as the balance sheet is in there constantly. So everything is applicable like throughout the year. So it's month end, quarter end, year end. You can pull those reports out of the system if you need to extract them or view them in the system.
Thank you. Next question is from Philip. How important was it to get input from non-financial colleagues about what was needed? Big questions about change management. It'd be really interesting to hear how you managed that at Comic Relief. So maybe I come to you first, Lydia.
Yeah, I mean, any big project like this, we have to produce a business case and that gets signed off by our board of trustees. So we already had buy-in kind of from the highest point, which was really helpful. And then throughout the process, we had demos from different suppliers and we asked non-finance colleagues to attend those. So our IT manager was quite involved because this would affect his department. We had budget holders attending as well from a kind of reporting aspect and what they'd like to see out of the system. So it was important because we wanted our system to serve everybody. So yeah, it's helpful to get the input from colleagues as to what they'd like to see as well. Make sure, I mean, ultimately finance are a support function. So we have to make sure what we're doing is going to support the rest of the business as well as ours.
Absolutely. Deborah, is there something you would like to add?
I'd say it can be quite key for certain things. You're wanting to drive people to be using Xledger as the tool to get their reports and not come to the finance team to kind of reduce the impact on the finance team. So having them kind of buy-in of the things they might like to see can kind of drive how you're going to maybe implement it and set it up. I mean, obviously within reason, if they're going, I want this, this, and this, and you're like, well, that's not even finance, it's not relevant. So it's kind of just like bringing it down exactly what you need, specifying it out and considering the real like kind of pain points for you. What are the worst things that hit you currently that you need to deal with now that you would like to be able to resolve with the finance system?
Thank you. We have a final question from Ian. How, and I know this is interesting for you, Lydia, because I heard you are the in-house expert on Xledger, so I'm sure you can answer Ian's question. How is the system now being managed after go live?
Yeah, so we had a period of hypercare with Xledger, so that was 1 or 2 months. Deb can correct me if I'm wrong, but we had regular check-ins with our consultant, and Xledger have got an online kind of ticket-based support system, so we can log a ticket and they come back during the hypercare. They come back extremely quickly, and even after that, ongoing, they come back extremely quickly if we've got any problems with anything. We've got an internal ticket-based system as well, which our IT department already had. So I just set that up so colleagues, if they're having trouble inputting their expenses or anything like that, they can send an email, and that's managed through a ticket-based system. That was just to try and cut down the amount of queries that the finance team were getting directly. So that's been really helpful.
Brilliant, thank you. Deborah, did you want to add anything to that before I round up?
Yeah, so specifically once you go live, you're not immediately cut off from your consultant or the project manager in any way. So you get another few months with us. So you get a couple of months where you are in hypercare with the support team, where your tickets are prioritized. And then we kind of triage those as to whether they should be consultant led, if it's to do with maybe a setup, or if it's just a query that the support team will help you answer. Following that, your support ticket, you still have the support tickets, and you still get another month of support from the consultant in the background. And then following the official close of the implementation project, you're actually transferred over to our customer success team. So you get a dedicated person there that you have regular check-ins with. So if there's any problems or issues or other areas of the system that you actually want to develop into, you can raise that with them, and then they'll liaise with the support team or get a consultant on board to kind of drive that forward for you and get it moving. So you're never left alone, and our support team, they're really fantastic. They answer really quickly, and they really do come back to you and really look into every aspect of your query.
I see Lydia nodding, so that clearly resonates. So thank you both so much. I think it was really useful to have both perspectives here, hearing from you, Lydia, about how you found it at Comic Relief, but also from Deborah, our experts on Xledger. So thank you both very, very much. Thank you also to everyone listening and watching this webinar, and for sending through your questions. They really help bring this to life more, and hopefully you found it very useful, and it will help you when you're planning your own system transition. A short feedback survey will pop up after the webinar finishes, so that will come onto your screen. Please do complete this. Your feedback is really important to us, and it really helps us shape our events. So with that, I just wanted to remind you that the webinar has been recorded. We will send you a link to the on-demand recording tomorrow. But with that, thank you very much and goodbye.